Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement on the current climate change protest and on our climate change policy. I apologise to members of the House if we're covering ground we covered extensively earlier, but I think it is a subject that will bear as much scrutiny as we care to give it. Mr. Speaker, colleagues will be aware that the public concern about climate change has grown to levels never seen before, and in recent weeks it has been incredibly powerful to see people of all generations across the world voicing their concerns about a warming climate and demanding a response, a global response to this global crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've heard loud calls today that we should declare a climate emergency, and my answer to that is that we can say words all we like from the dispatch box. What counts is actions. And what I would hope to set out is the many actions that we are taking that have enjoyed cross-party support, and my fervent hope that we will continue to tackle this enormous crisis in that spirit going forward. There is no doubt that climate change is the most profound environmental challenge facing the world today, and where more action is urgently needed. We shouldn't shy away from that fact. We must recognise the fact. We, I think, should welcome the strong and growing pressure for more action to cut our emissions, but we should also ensure that while we acknowledge the scale of the challenge ahead, we do try as hard as we can to build a consensus around change so that communities across the UK and indeed across the world feel secure, feel optimistic and feel involved in our shifts to decarbonise the economy. As I said earlier today, I think we should be talking about hope, not fear, communicating the progress that we have made globally and we have made here in the UK, which does demonstrate that this urgent action to decarbonise economy can sit alongside comfortably opportunity and growth and employment going forward. And we entirely accept, and I accept, that concerted action, more action at national and international level is urgently required. But I still feel that we must focus on the fact, because it shows that it is possible, that we have shown real leadership in the UK thanks to the cross-party consensus we have forged on this since the passage of our world-leading Climate Change Act over a decade ago. I want to update colleagues on this progress and to outline priorities moving forward. And again, forgive me if I cover some of the ground that we covered extensively earlier. In 2008, we were the first country to introduce legally binding long-term emissions reductions target. The Right Honourable Gentleman, Member for Doncaster North, was very instrumental in bringing that legislation forward, but it did enjoy strong cross-party support. And the Climate Change Act, for me, has been an absolutely seminal piece of legislation, because while I'm one of the few ministers in the world who stands here with high ambition and high aspiration and a legally binding set of budgets that we have to report on to Parliament, it is a great way of ensuring climate action survives the political cycle. And it has delivered. Since 1990, as many members will know, we have cut our emissions in the UK by 42%, whilst growing the economy by 72%. We are independently assessed as leading the G20 in decarbonisation since the year 2000. And people do talk a lot about the disparity between territorial emissions and consumption emissions. And I would invite members to consider the latest data that shows that our greenhouse gas emissions on a consumption basis fell by 21% between 2007 and 2016. Indeed, they fell 6% year on year in the year to 2016. Well, it is true, that is the data, and I'd be very happy to write to all members and share it with them. Well, again, I'd be very happy to write to the Honourable Gentleman with the data and copy in Ms Thunberg. Across the UK, almost 400,000 people are working in low-carbon jobs and their supply chains, a sector that is bigger than aerospace and is growing at a factor of 2 or 3 times the mainstream economy. And, of course, we have continued to be active on the international stage. My right honourable friend, the member for Hastings, was the minister who carried the baton at the Paris climate change talks, which were so instrumental in coming together, as the world had done previously in the Montreal Protocol, to show that there is concerted international support and action for tackling these enormous international challenges. And at the COP24 in Poland last December, in Katowice, a city where you could taste the hydrocarbons on the air. That's what happens when you burn coal. It must have been what London was like in the 1950s. We in the UK, and I pay tribute to my excellent officials, helped drive the work of progressive groups and secured global global agreement on a robust rulebook that brings the Paris Agreement to life. If you can't measure it, Madam Deputy Speaker, you can't manage it. And we are continuing to take targeted and impactful actions to support ambition internationally through promoting global alliances and collaborations, from the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which now has over 80 members, like the UK, committed to rapidly ending the use of coal as a source of electricity generation, to the Carbon Neutrality Coalition. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was asked frequently this afternoon, what are some of the things you've done in the last 6 months? So I thought I would focus on a few choice morsels to share with colleagues. Colleagues will be, I'm sure, sick of me waving the Clean Growth Strategy around, which is published, but I'm going to continue to do it in November 2017, because I believe it is one of the most comprehensive documents any government has put out across the world, detailing how we will take decarbonisation action across the economy. To date, we have taken action on the vast majority of those actions. And to highlight some, only last month I launched the offshore wind sector deal, including a £250 million growth partnership with investors to ensure that we will continue to invest in the North Sea, the best place in the world for offshore wind. But we will crucially drive up the UK content of that nascent industry to over 60%, and we will ensure the industry employs at least 30% women by the year 2030. This is an industry that is regenerating communities across our coastal communities right around the UK, and it's one where we absolutely lead the world and will continue to do so. In the spring statement, the Chancellor introduced the Future Home Standard, which said that all new homes will be required to have low-carbon heating systems and world-leading levels of energy efficiency by 2025, something that will radically transform house building in constituencies like mine, where most homes are not connected to the gas grid. He also announced that we will increase the proportion of green gas used in the grid in a bid to drive down the carbon profile of the hard-to-decarbonise heating network. Only this Easter weekend, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've had the longest run ever in this country of no coal contributing to power generation on this grid. When many of us were elected to this House, coal contributed 40% of our electricity to a system, and it is a testament to our own unilateral policies, including a carbon tax and emissions targets, that has led us to do something utterly transformational that other European countries have been unable so far to replicate. We also continue to contribute internationally. We are one of the largest donors of international-facing overseas development assistance. Over £6 billion committed in this Parliament, and in January the UK Climate Investments announced almost £30 million of investment in a dedicated African renewable energy company trying to make projects marketable and investable in so much of the developing world, so those countries never have to go through a high carbon stage in their growth cycle. And it's not just the Bays, it is right across government. We've published the ambitious 25-year environment plan. We've kick-started the creation of a vast northern forest, which will see 50 million trees planted from Liverpool to Hull. Tree planting is one of the most cost-effective ways to sequester carbon and improve soil conditions, as I know colleagues will know. And our new resources and waste strategy outlines steps to reform the packaging producer responsibility system, introducing deposit return schemes and food waste collection schemes. Now, we should celebrate these actions, but we have not to imply that we are in any way complacent, and not to suggest that we don't need to go very much more rapidly and further, but to demonstrate that this is a win-win, both for the planet and also for future generations in terms of their jobs and prosperity. And as colleagues will know, we celebrated last year our first ever Green Great Britain Week, and I can announce to the House tonight that we will be continuing this process with the new annual week returning for the second year on the 4th of November this year, and we look forward to the celebrations and also the challenges around that. So we've also, however, not shied away from the responsibility going forward, and that's why we were the first industrial economy after the publication of the chilling IPCC 1.5-degree report to ask our own Committee on Climate Change for advice on our long-term targets, particularly on a net zero target. And I'm looking forward to receiving their advice on the 2nd of May, and will engage with colleagues across this House on our next steps in the light of this. It's worth pointing out, Madam Deputy Speaker, the last time we asked for this advice, the committee told us it wasn't feasible to do either from a technological or a cost point of view, so it will be extremely interesting to see what has changed and how we can rise to that challenge. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have the utmost respect for those who are pushing for stronger action, to address the risk of uncontrolled climate change. The right to protest peacefully is a long-standing tradition in this country and a vital foundation of our democracy, and it has been good to see that the demonstrations have by and large been good-natured and the policing response has been sensible and proportionate. I welcome the passion and fervour of the protesters and their constant reminder to us of the duties we face in raising our eyes from the next few years of the conversation about, our relationship with Europe and thinking about the long-term challenges that we face. And I hope that those who have taken their passion public will continue to express their views without disrupting the daily lives of ordinary people or without endangering the safety of the public, and also without undermining the consensus that I so strongly believe we will need to support further, bolder action. We must work together to solve this challenge of climate change, in this House, in the other place, in classrooms across the UK, in boardrooms across the UK, in international negotiating huddles, in homes and throughout civil society, to deliver the broad, just and progressive action on climate change that we urgently need.
Barry Gardiner.